once have gone to Antarctica or Patagonia. Patagonia is named Land of the Big Feet, as in giants. They're going to meet with someone who an Admiral Byrd wrote in his diary before he was sequestered out of the public eye. The most famous polar explorer in history wrote about the king of the earth living in a subterranean kingdom with advanced flying craft and all sorts of conquering longevity, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is a critical point that people have got to understand. The tunnels that are under the desert southwest, the tunnels that go out of the Peruvian city of Cusco, the Coricancha, the Chincana. The Chincana is the tunnel, and the Coricancha is the convent, if you will, the giant cathedral over the tunnels. Why are the governments of the world so busy at covering it up? Well, they're covering it up for one reason, because giants are coming, and as you've heard Tom Horn quote the Septuagint, to fulfill the wrath of God. And I want to read something, Tom. There's a movement in the Christian church that they're claiming that they're the army of Joel. Now, I don't pay any attention to nonsense, but someone said, do you realize that's going on? Let me tell you, it goes to Joel chapter 2, and I'm going to just read about 4 scriptures, 4 verses. This is talking about the supernatural army of God that he releases. And let me read this. Joel chapter 2, verses 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Like the noise of chariots on the tops of mountains shall they leap, like the noise of a flame of fire that devours the stubble, as a strong people set in battle array. Before their face the people shall be much pained. All faces shall gather blackness. They shall run like mighty men. Now listen to this. This is talking about the giant army that's coming. They shall run like mighty men. They shall climb the wall like men of war. And they shall march every one on his ways, and they shall not break their ranks. Neither shall one thrust another. They shall walk every one in his path. When they fall upon the sword, they shall not be wounded. They shall run to and fro in the city. They shall run upon the wall. They shall climb up upon the houses. They shall enter in at the windows, okay? Like a thief. The earth shall quake before them. The heavens shall tremble. The sun, the moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. Okay, I've read that a bunch of times over my life, but I never got it until just the other day, the other morning. I felt like I finally got understanding. Said the genetic creations that Satan is creating and going to bring on the world scene will be met by that which I've already formed to combat them. Now, you can argue about, whether you believe this is true or not, but how many times you quoted Ezekiel's, vision of the dry bones, come from the four winds, O Spirit of God, and breathe upon these bones, when God asked Ezekiel the question. I don't think, Tom, that most people can embrace. I know they can't, okay? The only reason we can articulate and understand and hopefully help others to understand is because God's opened our eyes on this. But why is this critical? What does this have to do with salvation? The answer is everything. In the book of Revelation, Revelation chapter 18, it talks about men trafficking in men's souls. But here's the thing that I think, Tom, you talked about, that's really actually pretty true. They shall run like mighty men. And you've taught through the times we've been on the radio and written about it that even Nimrod began to become a Gibborim. That's another word for a giant. Do you want to take it from here and go where you want? Look, we jump around a lot, but ladies and gentlemen, we're giving you, how do I say this, 6,000 years of recorded history. We're giving you 6,000 years of hidden history. We're giving you tidbits, and by the grace of God, and thank you for your prayers and your financial support. When you buy Tom's book or my book or our DVDs or whatever, you're helping us. And, it's amazing that we couldn't do this without, the listeners and the viewers. So I want to say our heartfelt thank you. This is serious stuff, Tom, and I got to say this. For a certain point, maybe we were entertaining to some people, maybe the mockers and the scoffers and all out there, but at a very near junction in time, I'm talking very near, people's hearts will start to fail them for fear. I'm talking normal earthlings, because this thing with Podesta, this thing with all of the gore, the Satanism, the human cannibalism, the human sacrifice, the blood vampirism, God knows, Father in heaven, I have run out of words. Only the Spirit of God can make known to people the reality of what we talk about.
There's a great battle raging on planet Earth. And that battle has been raging for thousands of years. And here to talk about it is author and lecturer, Dr. Dennis Lindsay. And he has written this wonderful book, Giants, Fallen Angels, and the Return of the Nephilim. We've talked to you at one time before, and it's my pleasure to just sit and have a nice chat with you. At the beginning today, I talked about the fight that's raging, and we read about this in Genesis 3:15, where it says, "And I'll put enmity between thee and the woman, between thy seed and her seed." Going all the way back to Adam and Eve, a battle is joined at that time. And I think, Dennis, that a lot of people think the battle was thousands of years ago and it took place and it's gone now. There's no more battle. But actually, this battle continues to rage on even today, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it's focused over in Israel because Satan knows that that little piece of land over there is powerful in destroying the powers of darkness and his future plan to continue disturbing this whole planet of Earth and destroying everything that God's created, because he hates God, he hates his creation, and he wants worship. And so if he can't get people to worship, then he'll just destroy it. That doesn't matter. He hates every living person. And that's what the battle is all about, because God has a plan to redeem fallen man. Satan knows it. He's out to destroy God's plan of redemption at all costs. And now it's focused, the hatred is very alive here in the United States and all around the world, and especially in Israel.
Now, the battle that we're fighting today is a growing atheism, particularly in its institutional atheism. That is to say, the public schools now give the stiff arm to the gospel. When I graduated from the 9th grade, the Gideons were at the school passing out Bibles to every graduate from the 9th grade. It's hard to believe how much things have changed. The battle rages in government. The battle rages in big business, multi-million-dollar computer-controlled organizations. They deliver packages to our doors. They engage in a lot of activities that are wonderful. Medical breakthroughs, technological, scientific breakthroughs that have brought us many blessings. At the same time, there's an overshadowing control. And the people behind the powerful institutions today are looking darker and darker and darker. And we think, where has this all come from? Well, we just read Genesis 3:15. That's where it's come from. It's a long battle.
So institutions have rejected the Bible, have rejected God, have rejected creation, and they believe that somehow we have arrived here through evolutionary processes over millions, billions of years. The only problem with that is it's a faith issue as well. And if you are ever confronted by the evolutionary view, you understand it's not the evidences. We have the exact same evidences as the evolutionists. Only thing is we have absolutes. We believe in a worldview that believes in absolutes, right and wrong. But from a non-biblical point of view, a worldview, they do not believe in absolutes. If you look at the evolutionary view of how you and I arrived here, in the beginning there was absolutely nothing, and absolutely nothing for no reason whatsoever exploded. And for no reason whatsoever after that explosion, everything became out of that explosion. In other words, you and I are just a product of blind chance through an explosion. Does that make sense? Can you test that view in a science laboratory? No. In fact, that is the reason they've rejected the biblical worldview, because they simply say, in the beginning, God. You can't test that in a science laboratory. He created everything out of absolutely nothing. You can't test that in a laboratory. That's a faith issue. And it's not good to teach little children that view. But the other view is also a faith issue. Why then would an evolutionist, a professor in a college, a university, choose to believe that there's no God that created the entire universe, and instead nothing created the entire universe? Its sample is very easy. It's a hard issue. I tell my students, it's a hard issue. And that means I get to choose which rules I want to live by. I get to choose to be God of my life, and there's no threat of a God trying to tell me how to live. And there's no threat of eternal damnation, hell. That is why an evolutionist chooses to be an evolutionist. You can't prove what he believes in a science laboratory, but I get to be God. That is the difference between evolution and creation.
The supremacy of man.
I'm in charge.
I'm in charge.
Yes.
So, and you know, that is a fascinating illustration, because the Big Bang, if a tiny grain of matter exploded and there was no God, and all that you see was the result of an accident, you can't prove it. That's what you just said, and I'm sitting here thinking about this. But if God did the same thing, if he was the one who caused the expansion of the universe, can't prove that either.
That's right. It's a faith issue.
You have to choose which one you think it is.
And secondly, they say it's not good to believe the biblical view of creation of man, that God took the dust of the earth, breathed in it, and it became a living being. You can't prove that in a science laboratory.
That's true.
Well, what's the alternative? That atoms were floating around for millions of years, and they begin to come together, and after a period of time, those atoms begin to have chemicals, and those laws that govern those chemicals that brought it together, more chemicals, more atoms came together, and all of a sudden, poof, it became a living cell. Can you prove that? They've been trying to prove that in a laboratory for over 50, 60 years, and they've never been able to do it, even though they zap it with electricity, cosmic rays. They can't produce little atoms and chemicals to produce a living cell. It's a faith issue, the view of how man came about. But I get to be God. That's the whole issue.
Faith is what it's all about. And here's the thing, and I've said this so many times, and I'm thinking about it as you're talking. To me, one of the most important statements in the entire Bible is the three words spoken by the Apostle John in his little epistle, 1 John. And he says, God is love. Mm-hmm. Okay, take it or leave it. God is love. What is that? I mean, how do you put all that together? It's a faith issue, but it's also a love issue. That is to say, what's the source of love?
And from an evolutionary point of view, there's no such thing as love.
That's correct.
And so that is something that's just a figment of our imagination. We are simply chemicals that came together, right. And our brain is made up of chemicals. There's no free will. There's no way of emotions of love or hate. No, that's just fiction.
But one of the major themes of the Bible is rebellion. And it runs cover to cover. And you find at the very end of the Bible that God finally takes care of the problem his way, which is much different than you and I would think of solving the problem. He sent his only begotten Son, for one thing, but that's another story. This book, Giants, Fallen Angels, and the Return of the Nephilim, written by Dennis Lindsay, and it is, I don't know how to convey this exactly, but you talk about this rebellion and struggle, where we are now and where we're going, in terms of the rebels themselves, mm-hmm. the Nephilim, the angels who rebelled against God, mm-hmm. and the chief angel himself, Satan, fell. And you know, I always think of this as God could have destroyed Satan. This God is mm-hmm. all-powerful. But he didn't. He allowed Satan and the fallen ones to continue on in their rebellion to mm-hmm. this very day. And your book deals with that rebellion, I think, in a very special way.
Well, God has a tremendous love for his creatures, for you and I, for human beings. He wants a love story. I mean, the whole story of the Bible is about intimacy. He wants a bride, you and me. And so he is working all the way through that. He knows that to have a bride that will last forever, there's got to be a work in their heart. So I think that's why he allowed Satan to be in the picture to tempt man, because we have to make a choice of who we're going to allow to speak to us, to love us, and we have to be committed the same way. So I think that is part of the purpose of this whole rebellion, and God allowed the enemy to be there in the garden. He's going to have another garden for his bride, you and me, that make a decision to say, I'm going to follow you forever. I'm going to believe your word forever, Lord. And so I believe that's what the Lord is preparing for. But meanwhile, that battle is going on, and God allows that. And one of the things I do in this book is I show this demonic power that happened even after the flood. Something terrible is going on because of these fallen angels became involved with human beings, and they build these massive megalithic structures all around the world. And if you go and visit them today, you would say, how did this happen? I mean, we know a little bit about the pyramids, but the pyramids, we really don't know hardly anything. We're talking about blocks, 2.5 tons apiece. And they say that the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, was built over 20 years. And if that's true, and these blocks that are 2.5 tons apiece, that means one had to be in place every 2 minutes, about 10 hours a day that they worked. And they just say, how did this happen? And the precision of these cutting and slanting, and the precision and the direction and the way that they're set up is phenomenal once you begin to study the pyramids. Something supernatural was going on with the pyramids, and that's just one. Most of the world knows about the pyramids. Most of the world knows a little bit about the Stonehenge in England. But these are just a few. They're all over the world. Something powerful was happening at some time in the past, and it had to be with supernatural beings that were involved. And I deal with that in this book.
These individuals were not just supernatural, they were superhuman. That is to say, they made humans just look like nothing. And I think about this, and I think we live in a particular day when all this is coming to light again. It's sort of been forgotten about. There are megalithic cities under the oceans. Off Cuba, I was reading a while back. There's a huge megalithic city under the water off of the west coast of Cuba. And they're all over the world. And the pyramids you talked about, it was supposedly King Cheops, an Egyptian pharaoh, had that done. I don't think so. It's too accurate. It's the mathematics involved, almost beyond human reckoning. So we're dealing now with a super species who rebelled against God, and man is allowed to go on. And in some ways, the Bible talks about the interaction between the super species and humanity. And it's all because of the love of God, because out of this is going to come a victory in the end of time. There's going to be a rebuilding, but it's going to be done God's way. It's hardly the way that we would choose to do it. And Dennis's book, again, Giants, Fallen Angels, and Return of the Nephilim, deals with tough questions. And one of the questions that we have talked about is that we had a flood that destroyed virtually all of humanity, just a few survivors, we all know about that. But after the flood, which supposedly was going to cleanse the earth, everything dries out, and oops, we have another chapter of rebellion. And a lot of people have said, how in the world did that happen? How could the seed of the serpent get back into the human genealogy after God destroyed all of the rebels in the flood? And you deal with that question. And I think you deal with it very well.
Well, it's a simple thing that God wiped out that entire pre-flood world. All the people, not just a few of them, but all of them except Noah's family, who says it was perfect. And perfect doesn't mean he was without sin, because nobody is without sin. But perfect means something genetically means he's perfect. If you study that Hebrew word, something genetically he's perfect. In other words, he hasn't been contaminated by the DNA or whatever you want to call it of these fallen angels. Is it possible that his 3 sons, Noah's 3 sons, who married, that one of them could have been, or maybe more than one, could have been contaminated by these fallen angels, and produces those hybrids before the flood that God had to wipe them all out? So that daughter, after the flood, that survived, could have passed on that DNA, whatever it was, that mixture of part fallen angel and part human being, so that giants could have come after the flood. That is one possibility. We don't know for sure. We'll find out when we get to heaven, but that's a logical answer.
And you know, we read about Nimrod, and Nimrod was a mighty man, is a mighty hunter before the Lord. And some have said that if you examine the Hebrew language very carefully, it was not that he was a hunter before the Lord, he was a hunter against the Lord.
Right.
He was in opposition to everything the Lord wanted to happen. And I think that the story that emerges, again, revolves around the love of God. A loving Lord who wants to bring his children to him, but he doesn't want them to come on a false basis. He wants to test them first.
That's right.
And to see just how committed the children are. And he has arranged probably this most complicated of all tests in the universe. And out of his love, he has, if you will, created a situation in which you can come to him by faith, if you desire to do so.
Satan is all around, and after Nimrod, you know, the Lord steps in that tower, and he says, look, I wanted my people to spread out all over the world and take my glory and reveal my image of love, and do that. But Nimrod, I'm going to build a tower to myself and honor myself. That's what selfishness is all about. The Lord brings it to an end. But what happened is thousands of these towers were built all around the world. These pyramids around the world where they sacrificed to the gods.
Yes.
Satan was wanting to continue on his rebellion around the world. We're still seeing it today in different ways. But that's what happened at the Tower of Babel. And the Lord has a plan to destroy all of those towers in time.
He does indeed. And the fact is that he's doing what he's doing out of love. And that emerges, by the way, and I really hadn't thought about this until I started talking with you, but that's sort of the hidden story in your book, the love of God working in a world that is anything but loving. But it's working in a very quiet way, almost a background way, so that the love of God is available if you desire it. If you don't, you can go your own merry way. And that's an amazing test.
Whenever I'm asked, what do you say the Bible in one word? If you could use one word, it's all about intimacy. God wants intimacy with his creatures. If you study it all the way through there, it may be confusing, a lot of it, but once you have time to study it and put the pieces together, wow, it is a story about God's love and intimacy that he wants. And of course, when we understand that, what can we do? But just worship a God like this. That's the difference between the God of the creation and the God of the evil side of creation.
Who demands
it, right?
He demands
worship.
Demands worship, and you if you don't worship me, you die. And our God is nothing like that. Now, the book Giants, Fallen Angels, and the Return of the Nephilim sounds almost like a spooky book. That I'm not interested in that sort of thing. But it's not about sci-fi, although he mentions, Dennis mentions what's going on in the modern sci-fi world. The old world is trying its best to reemerge and to pop up and control us again in this age. And by the way, it'll be the world of the Antichrist, which we read about in Revelation, right?
Exactly. It's coming.
This is the fascinating thing. The story of mankind from the perspective of God's love. Giants, fallen angels, the return of the Nephilim is all about the dark side, but it's more than that. It's about the way God is solving a problem, and I think He's done a marvelous job putting all these facts together. Let's continue this story, because we've been talking about the love of God and this one problem. How did the sin of the fallen ones, reemerge after the flood? What happened then going forward from the flood to the time of Christ?
Well, all the way through the Bible, it's all about making a decision, a choice. Who are you going to serve? He even asked Peter, who am I? Who do you say that I am? And that's the same question that God asks all of us. Who do you say that I am? You are God.
Mm-hmm.
I will serve you. That's the big big question and test that God has for each individual that will determine whether we will become a citizen of heaven or a citizen of the penitentiary, how do you say that, of the universe.
A citizen of the penitentiary.
the jail of the universe, in other words. Are you going? No, I don't want to be that. I want to be in God's kingdom, His garden that He wanted us to be in right from the very beginning.
And we have a couple more minutes to continue our conversation. I'd like to, again, go into one question and that we hear more often, I think, than any other question here at Prophecy Watchers, and that is, why study this sort of thing? It's sort of dark. It's sort of confusing. Nobody really knows anyway. Why delve into this subject?
Well, it helps us to understand what the battle is really about. In other words, we know there's a problem in society. We know there's evil. We know there's good. But we don't fully understand the history of it and what is coming in the future. Once you understand a little bit about the past, you understand what the Lord is planning for the future, which the Bible really clearly outlines. We may not understand the book of Revelation. It just looks like a bunch of gobbledygook. But once you understand what Satan has done in the past, then you begin to understand what he's planning to do at the end of time. Because Jesus said, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be just before the Son of Man returns.
Mm-hmm. Well said. And how was it in the days of Noah? We think commonly, I suppose, sort of the innocent view is the days of Noah, well, everybody was just farming and getting along peacefully, no problems. Everybody lived to be 500, 600, 700 years, and it was just a paradise. But it really wasn't.
No.
It really wasn't. It was a day when dark beings descended to planet Earth and tried to take over God's property.
Yes.
It's happening again.
It is.
Right now.